بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم. As Ali mentioned, we're experiencing a power outage. So, this is why, we came on late. Actually, as fate would have it, we experienced a power outage exactly when my phone was at 1%. So I had to go into the car to let the phone get charged. And my computer also was dead. So, but we are here. And maybe this is a good visual aid for the chapter Fear of Poverty, because a lot of what we associate with poverty is not having life's necessities, utilities, food, things of that nature. The chapter that we're covering today is Fear of Poverty, and I think that this is something that Ibn Ata'illah, he talks about in his book At-Tanwir fi Isqat al-Tadbir. And he said that many of the mashayikh, many of the spiritual guides of the past, they would say, if you can guarantee for me confidence in God with regard to your provision, with regard to your sustenance and your livelihood, I can guarantee for you paradise. And that of all the things that produce anxiety for people, the word for anxiety in Arabic is hala, hala. Of all the things that produce anxiety, he says, nothing produces anxiety like uncertainty about your provision, like uncertainty about, where your next meal is coming from, or uncertainty with regard to your job security, or uncertainty with regard to how you will care for your parents or care for your children. This produces much anxiety. And I think it's relevant that we're talking about these issues now. The country is reeling economically from the work stoppages that happened as a result of COVID-19. And so all of us are feeling this pinch, right? All of us would now be subjected to fear about our provision, fear about what's going to happen to us. Imam Maulud mentions that this kind of apprehension, this kind of fear is a disease of the heart. And to understand how it's a disease of the heart, you have to make a fundamental distinction between self-reproach and self-doubt. I tuned into one of those Iman Wednesday sessions on Wednesdays, and Dr. Bilal Ware, Hafidhullah, may Allah preserve him, a good friend of mine, he gave perhaps what was the most succinct and descriptive difference of self-reproach and self-doubt that maybe I've ever heard. He said self-reproach, being possessed of, a nafs al-lawwama, a self-reproaching soul, that when you do something, you feel guilt-ridden. When you do something wrong, you are guilt-ridden, and then you seek to atone for the wrong that you did. He said, this is one of the greatest resources, one of the greatest assets we have in our attempt to purify our hearts, right? This idea of self-reproach. Self-doubt, on the other hand, is almost always from shaitan. It's always from shaitan. It's not the same as self-reproach. And he said the major difference is that self-reproach is always compelling you to do something, right? This is wrong, so I need to do something. Self-doubt is always stultifying. Self-doubt always incapacitates, right? Fear of poverty is not the same. Fear of poverty is not likened to, well-intended concern that prompts us to work. Fear of poverty incapacitates destabilizes, and then it opens us to the wicked and evil suggestions of shaitan. الشيطان يعيدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء. The Quran says, Shaitan promises you poverty, and then he commands you to indecency. Right? And there's many meanings associated with this ayah. Perhaps some of them we will cover. But now let's look at what Imam Maulud wrote in this didactic poem. Fear of poverty originates in having a bad opinion of God, the Exalted. And its cure is in having a good opinion. SubhanAllah, one of the names of God is Ar-Razzaq, the one who provides, the provider, the one who is responsible for the provision of his creatures. And some of us know the term rizq. Rizq, it literally means provision, right? And it's beautiful how rizq is related to razaq in the same way that provision is related to provider. And that we don't think that when we doubt the rizq, we are doubting the razaq. When we doubt the provision, we are doubting the provider. And to doubt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to have a bad opinion of Allah. It's to have a bad opinion of Allah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that faith has two wings by which it soars. One of them is husn dhan billah, having a good opinion of God. That you don't think that God is engaged in some plot to destroy you, to impoverish you, to leave you destitute, to leave you deprived, right? And perhaps more importantly, if you experience momentary bouts with these, destitution or deprivation or poverty, that you can see through them and that you can recognize these are temporary. See, when we talk about doubting the provision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does not mean that you will never experience poverty. It does not mean that you will never experience hardship. That does not mean that you will never be a recipient of sadaqah or that you will never be a recipient of zakat. No, people experience those things. But those rooted in faith, they realize that even then, as long as I'm here, God is still giving me what I need. And even if my situation is difficult, my situation is challenging, my situation is trying, this too shall pass, right? This too shall pass, right? Don't be like the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Fajr. فَإِذَا أَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ. People whose entire relationship with Allah is based on their financial standing. That if they're in good financial standing, my Lord has honored me, right? فَإِذَا قَدْرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانًا. But if we make the situation difficult or provision becomes tight, the person says, my Lord has debased me. My Lord has dishonored me. Ahanan. My Lord has dishonored me. No. But believing in the provision of God does not mean that we won't ever experience hardship. You know, and this is something I know from experience. Right now we're having a power outage. But this is not the first time that I've been inside the place that I live with the lights on. And to know that with every usr, there's yusr. With every difficulty, there's ease. Right? The only way to get through is to go through. So don't read here that to doubt the provision of Allah means that I believe that I will never, ever, there's no way that I could ever conceivably be in a position of financial insecurity. No, some people do. But even then, to recognize that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is sustaining me. It is God that is giving me my livelihood. It is God that is giving me my provision. This is what we mean. And if I am to regain a position of financial security, that too will come from God. And just like I'm patient with this, I'll be grateful for that. And continues. And knowing that what God possesses is never diminished. You know, subhanallah, Ibn Ata'illah in another place, explaining the verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to members of the Jewish community in Medina who said that the yad Allah was maghlula, that Allah's hand was contracted, that Allah's hand was, tied. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, said that, no, his hands are mabsutatan. They're outspread, which of course is an indication of his generosity. Ibn Ata'illah said, if you believe that, if you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands are outspread, then know that he has never denied you anything that you have asked for out of stinginess, because your Lord is not stingy. That hit me hard when I read that. Anything, if you believe that Allah's hands are extended, open, right? Jawadul kaf, open in his generosity. Anything that you have asked God for, that you've yet to receive, know that God would never deny you anything that you've asked for out of stinginess, because your Lord is not stingy. That which is with Allah is never diminished. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, attempting to teach Ibn Abbas about praying to Allah and asking Allah for what you want, because Allah has generous provision in his possession. He said, if every human being, the Prophet said, alayhi wasallam, and every member of the jinn all petitioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the same time, requesting of him, and he gave all of them everything that they wanted at the an and wahid, at the same time, that which is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not be diminished in the slightest. This is what your Lord has in his possession. And yu'ti liman yasha, he gives to whomever he chooses. Right? He gives to whomever he chooses. That which has not been given to you. If you believe that, then by necessity you must believe that which has not been given to me has not been given to me by way of a test. By way of a test. And perhaps for those who really excel in having a good opinion of Allah, maybe for my own good. That's difficult to say. We live in a society in which people have become very acquisitive. And being able to recognize wisdom, perhaps, in things that you do not have is difficult. Because we often measure ourselves by what we do have. Sufyan al-Thawri, radiallahu anhu, he said, I not only praise Allah Ta'ala for what he has given me, I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what he has denied to me. That's powerful. To think about people that have been entrusted with things that I haven't, been tested perhaps with wealth that I haven't, been tested with the access to privilege that I haven't. And which is not to say that we don't insist upon economic justice, but from a spiritual vantage point, for one to be able to say, Alhamdulillah. I was thinking about this earlier. thinking about where we are now in this country. And I was thinking that, you know, as a Black man in America, I feel it my duty to insist upon economic justice. However, I don't want to undervalue the subjectivity that Black people have gained from not being a privileged part of the dominant culture, from not having a place within their rendezvous of victory. Black people have developed a very pronounced subjectivity where things that are a part of our worldview that might not be a part of the worldview of other people are very dear to us. So even like the concept of soul, you hear that all, it's soul music, soul food, soul brother, soul sister, soul, soulful, right? If you use that expression, to have soul, what does it mean to have soul? Soul is kind of analogous to baraka, believe it or not, like soul. But soul is referring to kind of, you know, an immaterial quality that imbues mundane things, mundane practices, mundane times with special meaning. That's soul, right? Things that would ordinarily be mundane are imbued with a special immaterial quality that African Americans in this country have traditionally referred to as soul. It's soulful. Now, you only develop that kind of sensitivity to the immaterial when you don't have any material. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. You only develop those kinds of subjectivities when deprivation is a part of your lived reality, right? And I've been thinking, you know, how do we insist upon economic justice? But we need something, and this is where I think Islam has been tremendous for me. We need something that helps us to value our subjectivity, meaning there's a perspective that I've gained being outside the dominant culture, right? There's a perspective that I have gained not enjoying some aspects of privilege. I wouldn't give them up for the world. But I also have to insist upon economic justice, right? When we're talking about recognizing that what Allah has is never diminished and that anything that you have been denied, you've been denied out of a wisdom. This does not mean that we're not attentive to the material circumstances of people. No. Economic justice was a part of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, but at a level higher than, you know, distribution of wealth that we discuss at a societal level. At a personal level, being able to recognize the wisdom in what God has not given you is very important. And that personal insight about soul and about Black American subjectivity is just a place where I can see some of that. Attitudes about faith, attitudes about family, you know, the blues, right? It's very common if you study, African American culture, to hear people reference the blues or a blues sensibility. Philosophically, a blues sensibility is having a tragic comic sense of the reality of the dunya. Having a tragic comic sense of the reality of the dunya. That there is something about this dunya that is inherently tragic. It's dunya. But being able to see something not comical, but something emotionally moving about that does not lead to despair, but rather istighrab, amazement. right? So when you hear a blues singer, and this is a great Black American tradition, he's talking about apparent pain, misery, suffering, unrequited love, injustice. But he's taking those things and turning them into the most beautiful art and poetry and song that you've ever heard. One person termed it hell sounding so heavenly. The ability to engage that kind of transformative process, you only gain that when you don't have. You know, one person said the blues have always been totally American. Why are the blues so at home here? Well, because America created the atmosphere. But being able to see the beauty in that, that's a spiritual disposition. Doesn't mean anything about commanding, social justice, right? But Allah has not denied you anything because Allah doesn't have. Everything that Allah has denied you, apparently, recognize that He hasn't given you those things out of a wisdom that is known to Him. He continues, and knowing that what God possesses is never diminished in the least by His expenditure from it, and that what has been apportioned to you will reach you inevitably. You know, all of us know, mashallah, I am impressed, I marvel at how certain hadith, even though we'll say everything that is muttafaq alayh, everything whose authenticity is agreed upon by Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim, so they're equal in their sihha, they're equal in their provenance. But some hadith are just more widely disseminated than others. And the hadith about the angel that visits the womb of an expectant mother and decrees for that janeen, right, for that fetus, the livelihood, the lifespan, and sa'id or shaqi, felicitous or wretched. All of us know that hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, right? All of us know that. All of us are familiar with that. But what that hadith is supposed to do is result in us experiencing less anxiety about those things, less anxiety about death, less anxiety about tawfiq, right? Facilitation from a religious point of view, and less anxiety about rizq, about provision. That everything that you are going to use, everything that you are going to consume has already been apportioned to you. All of it. Everything. Every breath that you are going to take has already been apportioned for you. So the Prophet ﷺ said at the end of this hadith, فَاسْتَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ, so seek your rizq beautifully. Seek your rizq graciously. Because whether you seek what has been apportioned for you in a profligate way, or you do so in a dignified way, what has been apportioned to you is going to reach you. It's going to reach you. I remember asking one of my teachers, can we consider ill-gotten money or rizq? Meaning if someone sells alcohol for their money, or sells drugs, or steals, or cheats people, or exploits, is that considered rizq? I was asking this question, you know, do we consider just the kasb al-halal risk, or is any money risk, right? If you know, is it licit? Is it lawful for a person to say, this is my risk, even if they earn that money through an unlawful means? And our Shaykh said, yes, everything that you use, everything that you consume is your risk, even if you earn it in an impermissible way. He said, the thing is, you didn't have to do anything impermissible to get it. No one has to do anything impermissible to get the risk, right? فَاسْتَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ. This is all maktoob. رُفِعَ الْقَلَمِ. This is all written. The pen has lifted, right? تَجَفَّفَ الصُّحُفِ. The pages have dried, right? You don't have to do anything impermissible. And if the rizq that you earned through graft, through cheating, through illegal commerce, I'm going to say this right now because of the contemporary context, through looting, if the rizq that you earned in that way were sought through the halal, it would have still arrived to you. So the only thing that you've done, essentially, right, is your kasb in the risk is something that, now this is not to make a moral judgment of you know, in terms of looting, especially those that are, you know, economically depressed. But for people out there looting for sport, I don't know. That's a different thing. You know, it was a video of a Rolls Royce truck pulling up and engaging in some looting, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One who uses his religion as a means of benefiting his worldly condition is a sycophantic hypocrite in his transaction, and he ultimately shall be the one defrauded. You know, I realized that this is where we left off from the last time, actually, because we got a chance to talk about what this last stanza in this poem means. One who uses his religion as a means of benefiting his worldly condition is a sycophantic hypocrite in his transaction. Even though the language used here is very general. You know, I kind of like it like this, it's mysterious. Even though the language being used here is very general, the person or type of person that Imam Maulud has in mind is very specific. Is very specific. He's talking about someone that would lend credibility to oppressors, would use their religious standing to lend credence, lend credibility to oppressors, allowing those oppressors to root their legitimacy in the opinion or in the regard or in the affiliation or in the association with this religious authority. And the religious authority gains in that transaction money. Maybe because the religious authority would fear impoverishment if he or she refrained from such indecent behavior. And this is something that we see a great deal of. And this is something that we have to be very wary of. You know, when I was at Azhar, and the relationship that is enjoyed, if we are to phrase it delicately, between the ulama of Azhar and the sulta, right? The hukuma, the government, right? The prevailing authorities is very well known. And that relationship has been what it is from, in terms of the ulama lacking independence, and essentially being used as a source of domesticating religion, right? The state religion, being used to bolster and buttress the political platforms of rulers. That's something that has probably been going on since the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser, right? Or perhaps even Malik Farouk, perhaps even before Gamal Abdel Nasser. And it's unfortunate because when you lose your credibility, there's actually no value in the co-optation. Meaning there's no value in co-opting someone who the public views as being compromised. Like, what value is there in co-opting this person? The public views them as being compromised. And so I remember, and this is unfortunate, and by the way, this is not kufran and ni'mah. This is not ingratitude for the blessing of being able to attend Al-Azhar. And that nisbah, that association with the history of Azhar and the contemporary ulama of Azhar is something through which I feel extremely honored. However, I was aware when I was there of some of the public criticism of Al-Azhar. And perhaps the most straightforward of it, I heard from one cab driver. I said, "Ma ra'yu bi ulama al-Azhar?" What is your opinion of the ulama of Azhar? And he said, "Al-minhaj عندهم كل حاجة ماشي." Their methodology, everything is okay. العم حسني ده بيقول هو بيقول يعني حاجة والعلماء الأزهر يتفقوا. Hosni Mubarak says something, the ulama of Azhar always agree. Right? They always agree. He says something, they agree. And Imam Maulud is saying to anyone that would engage this sycophantic pursuit, right? Because he's not talking about a person that has sincere conviction, and that's the other thing. Some people, and because I want to be careful not to implicate anyone, some people are working with authorities that, to say the least, leave us with questions that we desire answers for. And they're not sycophants because they really believe in what they're doing. They really believe in what they're doing. They really believe that a positive contribution to the lives of people will come out of the work that they're doing with these authorities. And for those people, we say, we disagree perhaps on your method or your approach, but we would like to affirm your sincerity and your belief in what you're doing. The sycophant that Imam Maulud is talking about is someone that knows that what they're doing is wrong. You know that you have become an apologist for these oppressors. You know that you have become the rubber stamp, the religious rubber stamp for these men that are without conscience. You know that. And you do this just because you fear poverty. You do this just to secure your economic standing. You are the person concerning whom the ulama says, the Imam Maulud says, one who uses his religion as a means of benefiting his worldly condition is a sycophantic hypocrite in his transaction. And he ultimately shall be the one defrauded. That ultimately you will lose in this transaction. And we've seen this many times with people that, mashallah, I learned from, that if you're engaging this process, you will ultimately be the one who loses. You will lose your standing, lose your credibility. Your reputation will be damaged. And then beyond all of those, you will lose what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for righteous, truth-speaking scholars in the akhirah.